you're going to do it, the audit should be worth it. The problem is, audits are hard. Yet we've issued over 20,000 reports to 2,000 clients worldwide.
You'd be surprised how many times somebody will say, I don't have access to that, scan their badge, and the door opens. And then you have to try to figure out, well, wait a minute, how did you get access to that and why?
Cybersecurity and compliance will no longer be a mystery.
Hey everybody, welcome into our cybersecurity mission. My name is Allie Krings. Today we are sitting down with Stephen Collins, and I'm so glad you're joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this is gonna be really exciting because we're talking all about physical security. Before we dive into that topic though, will you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with KP for about 3.5 years now. I have a CISSP, I have a master's degree, I have a QSA, a CISA, a CISM, I have tons of certifications. Wow. I've been doing this for about 20 years now, and physical security is just one of the topics that I absolutely love to talk about.
Okay, so before Kirkpatrick Price, what were you doing before this?
So before this, I was doing management of cybersecurity for hospitals and laboratories, and then I did some telecommunications work before that.
Cool. Why has physical security been an area that you've kind of fallen partial to?
About 15 years ago, I met a gentleman who taught me how to do lockpicking. And that's kind of how I got into physical security overall, where I was learning how locks work, and I was learning how, if a lock is bad, how can I actually fix it? How can I make it better to, in this case, it was actually so that we could protect cabinets better that were holding PHI data. And so I was learning about how all these locks worked, and I was trying to figure out, okay, so what does this actually mean? And, you've got these little cheap locks that people are using. You can break them open in 5 seconds, and that's protecting all your health data.
Wow. Okay, so not that we're going to get you in any trouble here, and not that anybody other than those listening to our podcast are here, but you were only picking locks to learn how to make them better.
100%, all completely legal, above board. I would never do anything bad like that.
Well, okay, has it ever come in handy though? Like, have you ever locked the door accidentally, in the bathroom at home?
It's actually come in handy once where the CEO of a company I was working for had actually thrown some documents away that he didn't mean to, and we couldn't find the key to open the shred bin, and so I was able to pick the lock open and get him the items out. So it's definitely come in handy.
So it is like riding a bike a little bit.
Absolutely.
That is so fascinating. So this is really what this whole episode is going to be about, all about physical security. And I think one of the biggest things to address in this is right now we live in a world where a lot of it is online and it evolves every day. But our physical security, how and why is that still important?
Well, it's important for a couple reasons. You're right. We've moved away from a lot of the physical files towards virtual files. But what that means is that we've now got these massive data centers that are holding just a ridiculous amount of data. And we have to be able to protect those. So you can't just walk in and, rip a server out and walk away with a bunch of data. And so, but we also have to think about it as it's not just about protecting the data that sits in there.
Sure.
It's more about protecting your people. You put locks on the doors so somebody can't just walk in and hurt somebody. You put cameras in the parking lot to watch your employees. You put in fire suppression, things like that, so your employees are all safe. And I think a lot of people don't think about it as being like an employee safety thing first. They think about it more as, I just want to protect my documents, but really it's really about protecting people.
Wow. I hadn't really thought about it in that aspect, and we're going to dive into how that can affect people working from home or working remotely and whatnot as well. But I think we have to start with the top. And how does a company even determine what physical security measures they need to take or what they should have?
Yeah, that's a great question. It all starts with a risk assessment. So a company has to sit down and say, what do I have? Do I have a bunch of servers? Do I have a bunch of filing cabinets with data? Do I have credit card data? How many employees do I have? What am I actually doing as a business? And then they have to figure out, okay, based on that, what is the risk to all of the data? What's the risk to my people? And then once you determine all of that, that's when you figure out what are the actual controls I need to put in place.
Oh, that is fascinating. So it really does even go down as far to making sure you have the right physical lock on a cabinet.
Absolutely, it does.
It is so funny to me. So let's talk about that, because right now people aren't necessarily going into the office. I think for a lot of people who are going into the office, they might be one of few. It's almost split 50-50 from those working remotely. So how can a company still promote that idea of physical security when they might not physically be in the building?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's really two pieces to that. So one is the building itself. When you have a building that's half
Yeah.
empty or three-quarters empty, really the controls become more important because now you've got so much less people that are watching out for each other. If only 3 or 4 people are in a building such as this overall, you've got cameras, you've got all these locks and everything and badges to make sure only the right people are getting in. Because usually you'd have like an office full of people. Most of those people are going to say, hey, wait a minute, that person doesn't belong here. But when you've only got a couple people in there and somebody's just walking through a corridor, people aren't going to notice that as easily.
Wow.
But then you've also got like your home office. A lot of people
Right.
aren't considering that, where a thief could just walk in and steal your laptop from your home office, and it'd be a lot easier than breaking into your building to do it.
It sure would.
Yeah, and so a lot of that comes down to, physically protecting the device itself, making sure it's locked. If you put like a cable lock on it so someone can't just walk up and grab it. If you go and sit at like Starbucks, making sure that you're watching what you're doing. So I think it really just breaks down to those two big categories.
Are there conversations that companies should be having with their employees about when they are working from home? Or, I don't blame anybody for having to catch a flight and doing a couple of quick emails at the airport. What can they do in those scenarios to ensure that that information then is going to be, still kept confidential, but also physically that they can maintain that property?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when you're at home, a lot of people, what they need to think about is, what am I actually printing off when I'm at home?
Yeah.
And a lot of people I know are probably not printing as much anymore, but there's still a lot of companies that print everything that they do. So if you're sitting at home with the printer right next to you, what are you doing with those reams of documents that you're doing? Because normally if you were in the office, you throw them in the shred bin and someone else takes care of it. But you probably don't have that shred bin at home. So I think companies really need to tell people to be mindful of the documents that they're printing at home. And then, you're right, with the flight. Look, I know we've all done that. You're late to a flight or you're sitting there waiting, you want to bang out a couple emails, no big deal. You got to watch out for who's around you. Is anybody watching what you're doing? Is there a suspicious person where if you set your laptop down for a minute to pull out your phone and they just go walk by, grab it and run off? It's really just about being mindful of your surroundings, I think, in that scenario.
And it's always fascinating at airports because I feel like that's where the entire world collides for one brief moment. So you see people in all different industries and you don't always realize, those people around you could potentially, pose that threat.
Absolutely. I mean, you have everybody from a CEO down to somebody working a help desk, a security auditor.
Absolutely.
You're right. It's everybody from every walk of life there.
So when you're performing an audit, what kind of testing do you perform?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of different things that we look at, but I think some of the main things that we look for are camera systems and badge systems. So what we're looking for is, okay, where have you placed the cameras around? Are they watching people coming in and out of the office, in and out of your network closets, in and out of your data centers or your secured areas?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that you're actually storing the video for an appropriate period of time. Typically 90 days. That way if something does happen, you can go back and rewatch the videos and figure out what happened. And it's the same for the badge system. Where did you put the badge access controls? Where do people have to badge in? What are the badges like? How long are you keeping the records of people going in and out? Can you run reports against them? Are there automated alerts for if somebody's trying to scan a badge, 37 times and keeps failing? It's really things like that we're looking for.
I never thought about even just like the failed scans that you might have on like an old badge that you pick up at home.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it when you say keeping onto that video footage for 90 days, why is 90 days a good rule of thumb?
I think 90 days is a good rule because you don't always catch everything right when it happens.
Yeah.
So I think when you kind of give yourself that 3-month window, typically you're going to catch most of those bad things within that. And honestly, when it gets beyond that, at that point, it's usually too late to do much about it.
Sure.
But 90 days is just kind of an industry standard that's been determined. And so really it allows me to say, okay, well, something happened 4 weeks ago. Great.
Right.
Let's go back and look at exactly what it is that happened. Let's roll the video. Let's find out who did what.
So when it comes to, doing this audit and having those conversations about where the cameras are and where all these security measures are you ever testing it in the way, of trying almost to break in to just show it's not as maybe secure as they think?
Yeah, those are some of the things that we do too. Like we'll go to random doors to secured areas and hey, I know you don't have access to this or you're not supposed to have access to this. Scan your badge on that door and let's see what happens. And you'd be surprised how many times somebody will say, I don't have access to that, scan their badge and the door opens. And then you have to try to figure out, well, wait a minute, how did you get access to that and why? Was it appropriate? Was it not appropriate? And it lets you dig in a little deeper to that. It's a great conversation starter with the customer. And it's not that they're in trouble for doing that or anything.
No.
It's more about trying to figure out, okay, do you have a process that maybe just broke down that we need to help you fix?
Wow. how does that change based on company sizes? Because I mean, a company can be, as big as thousands of people,
Sure.
but also you might be listening to our podcast saying, my company is a team of 5 people in, a one-room office. So what kind of physical measures do you encourage for different sizes and different groups?
Yeah, I think it's all about the office space that they have. I don't know
Yeah.
that it's necessarily about the size, but it has
Okay.
to be manageable. Like if you have 5 people, you're not gonna have 300 cameras sitting around because it becomes unmanageable
Right.
at that point. But like I have a customer who has, thousands of employees. They're all over the United States. They've got tons of buildings. They have hundreds and hundreds of cameras, but they have a team that's dedicated to do nothing but watch those cameras, watch what's happening, watch people badging in to make sure that nothing bad is going on. So it's all about kind of having the dedicated staff based on the size of the building.
So you need to have that support in place.
Absolutely you do, because otherwise you just have a control that's sitting there and you're not doing anything with it. So at that point, why do you have it if you're not doing anything with it? And that comes back to what I said originally, that's all about the risk assessment. If you've put something in place, it's because you believe there's a risk to it, then you need to be managing that control, monitoring it, and that's what I'm looking for when I go in to do my audits.
Okay, so would you give us some examples or maybe some interesting findings that you've had happen when you've been working with a customer or working with a client? And, specifically, I think about everybody who's listening to our podcast, kind of their gears are turning right now. Give us some real world examples of areas that you challenged a company to maybe encourage a more robust physical security system.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples is I had a customer who had a data center that was on site.
Okay.
Now, typically with a data center, you want it to be completely enclosed. You've got to have like floor to ceiling walls. That way somebody can't crawl over the top or anything like that. But what they had actually done was put a gigantic glass window in front so that people could walk up and look inside the data center. And what I found was that they actually had an agreement with one of their customers that said, no, you can't have that. And so we had to talk about the challenges associated with that. And then, okay, so what do we do now that we have this? And there's another one where somebody didn't have the actual wall that went all the way to the ceiling.
Okay.
And somebody was able to crawl over, bang through the drywall at the top and actually get into the data center. So, yeah, that's why these kind of audits are so important, because we find these types of things.
Right.
We think about these. We think about how could a bad guy get in. That's why it's so important to have like a partner that understands how does a bad guy think to
Right.
be able to do this for you.
I mean, not everybody out here is just picking locks, trying to make them
Exactly.
stronger.
Yeah, there are bad people in the world, unfortunately, but it's okay because there's good people like me out there too.
Okay, I love it. And, on the flip side of that, those are great examples where you've found areas to encourage a stronger system. Where have you, in what ways have you been really wowed by customers or clients in the past where they've just kind of nailed all of their, kind of dotted all their I's and crossed their T's?
You come across that, I would say, more than you'd think you would. I actually have a current customer right now, and they just built a brand new data center, and we went to look at it a couple months ago. And even to get in, it's a gated place. You have to ring to get somebody to let you in. They let you in the front door. You have to sign in. You're escorted the whole time. Every door is locked. There's cameras watching everything. It's one of the most secure data centers I've come across, and they broke everything out into different rooms based on which business unit it was, so that only that business unit could get into that specific room. It was really impressive to see that.
How often should a company be testing this?
Continuously, ideally.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, if you can't be doing it continuously, there's a lot of it that you'll be doing like on a quarterly basis. Make sure that your cameras are actually on and recording and they haven't failed somewhere.
Yeah.
Making sure that your badge system is actually recording the entries. Usually for us, if it's a PCI audit, we do it annually. If it's a SOC 2 audit, it's usually done annually. But then there's other controls that you as the firm itself, like as the customer, are going to be testing on your own. Sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly. It just depends on the control.
I know this is kind of a funny question, but I wanted to ask about scanning into your office, right?
Sure.
Because there's basically 2 options for like a locked door. You're going to have a key, or you might have like a badge that you simply hold up and it gives you access, right? Is there ever a time where one is better than the other, or what should a company be looking for when they are trying to make a decision on giving their employees access?
Yeah, so I like badge systems more, only because it's much more easy to trace. Because so everybody's given a badge,
Yep.
and that badge is assigned to just you. So when you scan on it, I know that you went into this specific door. The problem with the key system is, unless you're taking away keys and rekeying doors when people leave, you have no idea who's actually been given that key. Not to mention, I can just take the key down to a locksmith and say, make me 13 copies, and I can give them to anybody I want at that point, and the company's not going to know that I've done that.
Right.
Yeah, so it's much better to be able to trace all of that, which is why you have the electronic badge system, because it's fully traceable. And then it's easier for me to audit at that point because I can see all the logs, who did what access is associated with your specific card, all the doors that have them. It's just much easier from an audit perspective to be able to track and trace all that.
You know, when you think about obviously physical security, but then a lot of people, and we even experienced this today when we came into the building, there's not a lot of desktops anymore.
Yeah.
Most people are working from their laptop, bringing it into the office, then taking it home, taking it wherever they go. What kind of measures can a company encourage their employees to take to ensure that those private pieces of property are, properly stored?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the problems that people run into with their laptops is that they're leaving it in their car. Whether it's, hey, I put it in my backpack, I set it in the back seat, and then I ran into Target.
For sure.
A lot of people do that. I'm sure every one of us in this room is guilty of doing that at some point. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it's real easy for somebody to walk by, smash your window, grab it, and walk away in 3.5 seconds. And so you got to make sure that those things aren't visible. Throw it in the trunk if you can, or better yet, just leave it at home.
Wow. Okay, Stephen, we've talked, I think, just about with everything on physical security. Is there anything else you want to add in, or any other stories that just kind of come to mind and that you love?
So I think the one story I want to bring up is, I have this customer, and they had this really small office space.
Okay.
And they wanted to move to a newer space that better represented them. And what they did was they reached out to me and they said, hey, look, here's the actual layout of the building. Here's our office layout. Here's where everything's going to go. Can you tell me what all this should look like? Where should I put badge readers? Where should I put cameras? What would all that look like? And that's what we do, is we're able to look at that, and while I can't implement it for you, I can still give you suggestions. Hey, I think you should place a camera here to watch this door. Put your Ring doorbell here, put your visitor log here. And we're really able to help people better understand the controls that they need to have in place when they reach out to us beforehand. Because once you've implemented it, it's going to cost you a fortune to have to redo everything.
Wow. So, okay, you've just got me thinking about these placing cameras. In general, when you walk into a building, you can see a camera.
Yep.
Do you encourage people to have visible cameras, or is there also a benefit to having hidden cameras?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Okay.
Personally, I like to see the cameras.
Yeah.
That way, obviously as the auditor, so I can walk in and say, okay, camera there, camera there, camera there.
Yep.
But I think when the cameras are there, people can look up and see them and think, okay, there's a camera watching me. Maybe I should double think what it is I'm about to do.
Interesting. Fascinating. Well, Stephen, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. I really appreciate it. And would you do this again?
Absolutely.
Okay, are you still picking locks these days?
Only legally, of course.
Only
but yes,
legally,
of course.
okay. Promised on our next podcast, Stephen is actually going to give us a full breakdown and YouTube tutorial how to break into any lock.
100%.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
When you work with a Kirkpatrick Price cybersecurity auditor, you work with someone who's been in your shoes. Let's see what the next expert is ready to share to support you in your cybersecurity mission.
Hi, my name is Reed Ashbridge. I'm a penetration tester here at Kirkpatrick Price, and I really enjoy working in penetration testing because it gives an opportunity to work with clients and help them identify areas where they can improve their defenses. One of the resources that I really find helpful in my job is the MITRE attack patterns, and it's a good tool for leveraging and understanding how threat actors perform their attacks, and helps us emulate and simulate for our clients what types of attacks they'll see out there in the real world.
Today's episode highlights the need for physical security to achieve our challenging compliance goals. Access control should be implemented to protect against physical threats to your people and information storage locations. Are you ready to join a community of 10,000 people who are working together to elevate the standards for cybersecurity and compliance? It's free to sign up at kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast or check the show notes and achieve greater levels of assurance today. Thanks for joining us on our cybersecurity mission.